In 1963, as Soviet Tu-95 bombers pushed NATO response times to mere minutes, Britain faced a critical defense gap. Budget constraints left the Royal Navy without a modern fighter capable of intercepting threats at supersonic speeds. Facing being outdone by the Soviets, a desperate Britain did the unthinkable. They turned to a foreign warplane for a solution. The American McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II caught their eye. A Vietnam veteran boasting Mach 2.2 speed, cutting-edge avionics, and a staggering 18,000-pound payload capacity. But for the nation that had produced the Spitfire and Harrier, simply adopting the Phantom wasn't enough. They aimed to perfect it. The F-4K Phantom FG.1 was born, a distinctly British interpretation of American muscle. At its core roared all-new Rolls-Royce Spey Turbofans with 30% more thrust. But this power came at a price. During trials aboard HMS Ark Royal, a pilot spooled up his engine for takeoff, unleashing exhaust 150 degrees Celsius hotter than expected. Steel warped, paint bubbled, and to the shock of all present, the flight deck of Britain's mightiest carrier began to melt. As the 1950s drew to a close, Britain's aerospace industry found itself at a crossroads. The Royal Air Force yearned to replace its aging English electric Canberras and Hawker Hunters, while the Fleet Air Arm clung to its obsolescent de Havilland Sea Vixens. Hope initially rested on two ambitious British projects, the BAC TSR-2, a sleek monster designed for precision bombing, and the Hawker Siddeley P-1154, a supersonic warplane that promised to revolutionize both close air support and fleet defense. But dreams began to crumble in the harsh light of reality. As the calendar turned to the early 1960s, these projects found themselves in a quagmire of spiraling costs and inter-service rivalry. The P-1154, torn between the conflicting demands of the RAF and Royal Navy, became a textbook example of trying to please everyone and satisfying no one. Then came the political earthquake of October 1964. A new government swept into power, armed with a mandate for change and a sharp pencil for the defense budget. In one fell swoop, both the TSR-2 and P-1154 were scrapped. Faced with this crisis, British military planners did the unthinkable. They turned their gaze across the Atlantic. The McDonnell F-4 Phantom, already proving its mettle with the U.S. Navy, suddenly looked like a lifeline. It was battle-tested, available immediately, and promised to fill the gaping hole in Britain's air defenses. For the Royal Navy, it was a godsend, a ready-made solution to their fleet air defense needs. The RAF, while less enthusiastic, saw it as a necessary stopgap, while they eyed the American F-111 to replace their beloved Canberras. Yet what seemed like a straightforward solution was soon revealed to be anything but. Trials revealed a critical problem in the adoption of the Phantoms into the Royal Navy. British aircraft carriers were considerably shorter than American ones, which made the takeoff and landing of Phantoms an extremely risky affair. But this was Britain, after all, a nation with a proud history of aerospace innovation. They couldn't just modify the Phantom so it operated properly off British vessels. They would take this Phantom and remake it in their own image. The British aircraft industry, now devoid of a domestic fighter to work on, set out to transform the F-4 into something uniquely British. At the heart of this transformation lay the Rolls-Royce Spey Turbofan engine, a power plant that promised to turn the already formidable F-4 into something extraordinary. This wasn't just an engine swap, but a complete reimagining of the Phantom's capabilities. The Spey, shorter but wider than the American J-79 turbojet, demanded significant changes to the Phantom structure. British engineers set about widening the rear fuselage by a full 6 inches. The Spey's different exhaust characteristics required a deeper aft section, while its higher mass flow rates called for 20% larger air intakes. To further boost airflow at lower speeds, a set of auxiliary intake doors found their way onto the rear fuselage. These bold changes would increase the engine's output to 20,515 pounds of thrust, compared to the J-79's 17,845 pounds. This increase in thrust would allow the Phantom to take off and land on the Royal Navy's smaller carriers with greater safety margins. But the modifications went far beyond that. Performance estimates painted a picture of a British Phantom that could outshine its American counterpart in several key areas. A 30% reduction in takeoff distance, 20% faster climb to altitude, higher top speed, and extended range were all in the cards. The Spey's efficiency at lower altitudes promised better range and acceleration, a fact that would be dramatically demonstrated during a 1969 deployment aboard USS Saratoga, where the British F-4K consistently outpaced the American F-4J off the deck. But this quest for perfection came at a cost. The extensive modifications drove the unit price to 3 times that of the standard American model. The project's budget went through the roof, from an initial $70 million to over £300 million. The original order for 400 aircraft dwindled to a mere 170 as budget strained under the weight of ambition. The small size of British carriers, HMS Eagle and HMS Ark Royal, compared to their American counterparts, demanded further changes. The F-4K required a significantly strengthened undercarriage to handle higher landing weights, a necessity born of the Royal Navy's policy of recovering unused ordnance. A specialized nose gear extension increased the aircraft's angle of attack during takeoff, compensating for the shorter, less powerful British carrier catapults. As the modified Phantoms took shape, they embodied the best of British engineering ingenuity. Nearly half of the aircraft's structure and equipment was built domestically, with parts shipped to St. Louis for final assembly. The result was a Phantom that looked similar to those who had reigned over the skies of Vietnam, but was, in fact, a completely different beast. As the British Phantom took shape, it became clear that the Spey engines were just the beginning of its transformation. The Royal Navy and Royal Air Force each had their own demands, sculpting the American design into something uniquely suited for British service. For the Fleet Air Arm, the Phantom was enhanced with a nose radome that could fold backwards against the fuselage, allowing the aircraft to squeeze into the cramped hangars of HMS Ark Royal and HMS Eagle. This seemingly simple modification spoke volumes about the ingenuity required to make the Phantom work in British service. The RAF, meanwhile, had its eyes on the ground. Their Phantoms, designated FGR-2, were equipped with an advanced nav attack system from Ferranti, turning the Interceptor into a potent strike aircraft. 30 of these land-based warplanes were wired to carry a special reconnaissance pod, a nod to the RAF's heed for versatility in an age of shrinking budgets. Both versions received the AN/AWG-12 radar system, built under license by Ferranti. This British-made equipment gave the Phantom the ability to pierce the murk of North Sea weather, seeking out intruders with a reach that would make its American cousins envious. The radar was integrated with the Westinghouse AN/AWG-10 system, creating a hybrid beast that could guide British-made missiles like the Skyflash with lethal precision. As the 1970s dawned, further refinements arrived. A Marconi radar warning receiver found its perch atop the tail, giving pilots an extra edge. The addition of a gun pod might have seemed a step backward in the age of missiles, but it proved that in air combat, old lessons are never truly forgotten. Yet, for all the ingenuity and effort poured into the British Phantom, challenges remained. The cost had ballooned far beyond initial estimates, and the resulting fleet was far smaller than originally envisioned. In 1969, as HMS Ark Royal prepared for the arrival of its new Phantom FG.1s, anticipation ran high. The British howl of twin Rolls-Royce Spey engines promised the continuation of British naval aviation dominance. Yet, the modified Phantom, with its additional power, brought its own problems aboard the carrier. The first hint of trouble came during routine flight operations. As a Phantom spooled up for launch, the deck crew noticed something alarming. The paint on the flight deck began to bubble and peel. Moments later, the metal itself started to warp and distort under the intense heat of the Spey engine's exhaust. It was a disaster. The Spey engines, so proudly touted as superior to their American counterparts, were running over 150 degrees Celsius hotter than the J-79s they replaced, threatening to turn Ark Royal's flight deck into a twisted, molten mess. Frantic modifications ensued. Engineers hastily installed water-cooled jet blast deflectors, transforming sections of the flight deck into a complex system of pipes and cooling mechanisms. This incident increased even more the already inflated budget allocated to the British Phantom program. The incident laid bare the double-edged nature of Britain's ambitious Phantom modifications. In pushing for superiority, they had inadvertently created a beast too hot for its own nest. Soon, many military analysts began to wonder if it wouldn't have been wiser to continue with the development of a domestic warplane instead of looking for a foreign one. Despite these setbacks, the Fleet Air Arm pressed on. The 892nd Naval Air Squadron embarked on Ark Royal, determined to prove the worth of their new steeds. Their first operational deployment, ironically, came aboard the American USS Saratoga in the Mediterranean. Here, free from the constraints of Ark Royal's modified deck, the British Phantom showed their mettle, consistently outpacing their American F-4J counterparts in scrambles and intercepts. As the 1970s progressed, RAF Phantoms joined their naval brethren in the front lines of the Cold War. From RAF Bruggen in West Germany, they stood vigil along the Iron Curtain. During NATO exercises, British Phantoms pushed the envelope of their capabilities, operating in Arctic conditions and proving their versatility in both low-level strike and high-altitude interception roles. During one such operation, dubbed Frequent Intercept, Phantoms flew perilously close to Soviet airspace, narrowly avoiding deadly encounters. These exercises pushed airplanes and pilots to their limits, heightening the precarious balance between peace and war. Even after the retirement of HMS Ark Royal in 1978, the Phantom remained central to Britain's air defense. Following the Falklands War in 1982, Phantoms were deployed to RAF Mount Pleasant on the Falkland Islands, where they provided air cover to deter any Argentine retaliation. Although they never engaged in direct combat during the war, their presence added a powerful post-war deterrent. With their extended service life in the RAF, these aircraft continued to serve as a vital part of Britain's Cold War defense. The success of the F-4K Phantom FG helped stabilize Britain's aviation industry during a critical time. Companies like the British Aircraft Corporation and Hawker Siddeley thrived through their involvement in the Phantom's modification and assembly, and this experience positioned them for future success. The ability to integrate British technology, like Ferranti's radar systems, into a foreign airframe showed that even in the face of adversity, Britain could lead in innovation.